Welcome back to another Yarnspirations tutorial. My name is Brittany and I teach over at Be Hooked, and it is my absolute pleasure to share this tutorial with you today. Now in today's episode, I want to highlight two key parts of the Dreamy Princess Crochet Snuggle Sack, a free pattern that's available from Yarnspirations.com. If you haven't done so already, I encourage you to download the free pattern from Yarnspirations.com. In it, you'll find 4 pages of instructions, but I don't want that to scare you away. This pattern is actually much easier than it looks. It's broken down step by step. Specifically, we have 5 different sections to this pattern. Now here, looking on page 1, we're going to find most of the instructions for the sack base. So we're going to work with our main color, and we can see this instruction starting right there. Our main color will work a very simple repeat of only half double crochets for a while until it measures about 120 inches. So think of it this way. We're going to work one big long rectangle. Then what we'll do is we'll fold it at the middle point, so on this dotted line, and then we'll seam up the sides. That's what we'll work right here for the edging section. Now here's where things start to get a little more interesting. So from here we move on to the different dress parts, and we can see them here. Now I do recommend that you work these in the order in which they're given here in your pattern. So we can see the next thing we want to work is the center bodice, followed by the instructions for that. We do incorporate one stitch here that's a little bit new, half double crochet 2 together, but for the most part we are working with half double crochet stitches. Then we'll add the left bodice. Now this is attached directly to the center bodice, which is why you need to work these things in a specific order. Once you get that done, you'll move on to the right bodice, again attaching it to the center, and then you'll start on sort of like your next segment, the skirt. So we'll work the center skirt first, we'll go on to the right skirt, we'll move on then to the left skirt, and then finally the sleeves. This is the one thing that we're going to cover in the tutorial. I want to highlight some of these different stitches and the techniques that you need in order to make the sleeves and attach them. So before we hop into the studio and see how to crochet our sleeves, I want to direct your attention to page number 3 of the pattern. About halfway through, we'll see the instructions for the sleeves. Of course, we're going to make 2 of these, so keep that in mind. We're going to work through this complete set of instructions twice. Keep in mind that the instructions for the sleeves sort of bleed here into page number 4. That's where they stop. This is really just the tail end of the ruffle. So what we see here, this is sort of added in. It's crocheted in with the sleeve, but it's sort of a separate piece. So go ahead and grab color B. We're going to work with that first. Have color A in standby mode because we'll be using that for the ruffles. So to begin our sleeves, we'll grab color B and create a slip knot. And then we want to chain 25. So what I like to do is hold my hook in my dominant hand here and run my fingers along the chain so that I can see the braid, or that top part, all the way through and make a U shape. Now from here, I'll go ahead and stick my hook in that first chain that we made, and I'm just catching that top loop of the chain. Then grab your working yarn, yarn over, pull through that first chain, and then pull through that second chain. Now if you do it just like that, you shouldn't have any twists in your chain. So now that we have our ring, the next thing we need to do is work on our first round. So to start the round, we'll chain 2, and the pattern instructs that this chain 2 does not count as a stitch. So what we need to do is find our first chain, and for me this is right where I made that join. So if you just kind of pull up on it, you can see where it's coming from. That's where I want to work my first half double crochet. Now for me, it also helps to mark this first stitch with a stitch marker, just so I know where to join when I get back around at the end of this round. So now I'll find my next chain, make sure I'm looking at the front of it, so where it looks like a braid, and then I'll make half double crochet in that next chain, and then 1 half double crochet into every chain. So once you've made it all the way around, we can go ahead and remove our stitch marker. And then we'll join with a slip stitch into our first half double crochet. So that place where my stitch marker was, just insert your hook into that stitch, yarn over, pull through the stitch, and then through the loop on your hook. Now that completes round number 1. What we want to do for rounds 2 through 13 is make 1 half double crochet into every stitch. So you'll start off each of these rounds with a chain 2, but know that that chain 2 does not count as a stitch. And because of that, we need to make our first half double crochet in the same space where that chain 2 is coming from, so our very first stitch. I always find it easy to go ahead and mark that first stitch so you don't have to guess where to join at the end of your round. And that's all there is to it. Go ahead and work up rounds 2 through 13 using the same stitch pattern. We'll meet back up at the end and talk about one new little technique. Now, after you've worked up those first 13 rounds of your sleeve, we're going to do something a little bit different in round 14. The first thing we're going to do is chain 2, and rather than work in both loops of the stitch, so just like that, we're just going to work in the front loop only. So when you're looking at your work, the loop that's right here is considered the front loop. So that's where we're going to work our stitches. The other thing we're going to do different is increase. So let's just follow along with the pattern step by step. We'll make 1 half double crochet in the first stitch. And then 1 half double crochet in the front loop of each of the next 3 stitches. Then for the next stitch, we're going to increase. So that just means we'll make 2 half double crochets in that next stitch. Again, we're still working in those front loops only. We've actually started on the repeat here, so that is the first part of our repeat. The next thing is that we want to make 1 half double crochet into each of the next 4 stitches. Then we'll just pick up at the beginning of our repeat. So 2 half double crochets in the front loop of the next stitch, followed by 1 half double crochet into the next 4 stitches. Now to wrap up round number 14, we'll make 2 half double crochets in the last stitch. Once we complete that, then we'll join with a slip stitch to our first half double crochet. So having a quick look at the pattern, we have finished round 14. So we're right here. We also worked round 14 in the front loops only. We're not going to do that for rounds 15 and 16. The techniques that we'll use for rounds 15 and 16 is something that we're already familiar with. We are going to increase on this round, so we'll see different places in our pattern where we need to add 2 half double crochets. The thing that's going to change primarily from rounds 15 and 16 to what we've seen previously with round 14 is the number of stitches in between our increases. So 4 for round 15, 5 for round 16. And then of course we're not working in the front loops only, we're going to work in both loops of the stitch. So what I need for you to do at this point is finish crocheting rounds 15 and round 16 and then fasten off. So I have my sleeve here and all I did was fold it down so that that 13th round is exposed. Now you see this line or this ridge? Those are the back loops, the loops that we left unworked back in round 13, and those are the loops where we're going to work our stitches for this round. So go ahead and grab color A, create your slip knot. I went ahead and put my hook in that first loop there. So this is my join. I just followed that all the way up to here. We'll chain 2. And we'll make 1 half double crochet in the same space. Again, that chain 2 doesn't count as a stitch. And for this round, it's really simple. We just want to really focus in on that back loop and make 1 half double crochet in each one of those stitches. Now we will have a total of 25. You can count as you go to make sure you're on the right track before we move on to the next round. So now let's get to work on the roses. So I want to draw your attention to page number 4 of the pattern here. Our rose instruction will start here. It's so simple. We just have 2 rows to work. Go ahead and grab color C and let's see how it's done. The first thing we need to do, of course, is create our slip knot. I'll place that new loop on my hook and then I want to chain 12. So for the first part of row number 1, we need to identify the 3rd chain from the hook. 1, 2, and 3. So this is my 3rd chain from the hook. Now I want to work 3 different stitches in this chain. We'll start off with 1 half double crochet, and I'm just going to work into sort of like the front of the chain. I'm catching that top loop. This is really easy for me. I think it will be easy for you as well. But if you're more comfortable working in a different part of the chain, by all means, do what you're most comfortable with. Now I'll finish off that half double crochet, and then I want to follow that up with a chain 2. And now the instructions say to make 1 more half double crochet in the same space. So I'll really just try to find the bottom of that post, see where that's coming from. Then I'll know where to stick my hook to work that last half double crochet. So now we're moving up to our repeat within this first row, and it's really similar to what we just made. So the first thing we need to do is find our next chain, which I can see right here, and I'll work a half double crochet, a chain 1, and then a half double crochet, all in that same space. Then we're going to repeat that for every remaining chain. Now because we increased on every single one of our chains, so in other words, we made 3 stitches for every 1 chain, so we increased by 2 every time we did that repeat. That's why we're getting this curly, spirally effect. This is really going to help us to assemble the rows once it's all said and done. Okay, so for row number 2, we have a little bit more to keep track of, but it's still pretty simple. So we're going to start off by making a chain 1 and turning our work. And the first thing we need to do is make a single crochet into the first stitch. Now we've come to the place where we have our chain 1 space, and if you spread it apart, you can kind of see that hole or that gap there. Well, our instructions say that we need to make 5 double crochet in that chain 1 space. So I'm just working my hook in the space below the chain, sort of wrapping it around, and I'll work my double crochets in that chain space. So the next thing we need to do is find our next half double crochet, and a lot of times this gets hidden underneath all of these stitches here. So you might have to shift everything over so that you can see that post. So when you identify the post, then just look right on the top of that, and then that's where you can find the V or that top part of the stitch to work into. So we need to single crochet in that half double crochet. Then we're going to skip the next half double crochet. So we're going to skip this guy right here. Then we're going to pick up on our repeat. So the next stitch is another chain 1 space, and we need to make 5 half double crochets in that space. Now we want to push everything over so we can find our first half double crochet post. We'll make a single crochet in that space. we'll skip the next half double crochet and repeat. So when you make it to the end of your row, we still have that one remaining stitch in our repeat, and that is where we need to single crochet in that next half double crochet, and that will finish things off. Now we need to fasten off, but go ahead and leave yourself a nice long tail so that we can use this tail to sew the rows together. Now go ahead and take that tail and just pull it through the loop on your hook. Then you'll have a nice secure end here. And now we can coil it together. So it could look like any number of things right now. The way I like to do it is start with one end and then just sort of roll it around, and it really does just sort of fall into place. Now you want to make sure it's not twisted in any way and that the petals lay in the way that you want, because we are sewing them into place at this point. So right now my tail is in the center of the flower. I really like it to be that way, because what I'll do is I'll take this tail and I'll pull it in through the middle. That'll secure it up that way, and it gives it a little bit more of a natural look. And then just situate the petals on the outside. Now you can coil your rows really tight or really loose. Of course, you're going to have a bigger or smaller flower depending on that. The other thing to keep in mind is sometimes I like the petals to be offset from each other. So I've got a petal that kind of bumps up in this way, and then on the round that's behind that, it's over here and over here. So take one of your large darning needles and thread your tail on that. And as promised before, I'm going to take mine and go right down into the middle of my rows. The rest of the action is going to happen on the back side. Now we really just want to sew all of these layers so that it doesn't come apart. And what I find is the easiest thing to do is really identify the bottom of the row of wherever the place is that you're going through, and just catch that with your darning needle. I like to use whip stitches, but honestly you can use any sewing method that you're comfortable with. And just go back and forth, place as many stitches as you can. And again, it's always a good idea, since we're working on the back side here, to just flip it over and make sure that things are going the way you want them to, and that your rose is shaping up the way you like. Once your rose is situated the way you want, I like to go ahead and leave this tail here, because I'll use this to sew the rose onto the front of the dress. I just have this one little tail that I need to fix. So this was my starting edge, or my starting tail. And I'll just take it, make sure I poke it through the bottom. And it never hurts to go ahead and tie a knot here. So now that you've made one of your roses, you just have two more to go. We want to make a total of 3 so that we can attach them to the front part of our dress right here. Now, once you have all of your components crocheted, the last thing we need to do is sew it all together. You can find this on the last page of your pattern in the finishing instructions. Now, you do want to sew the pieces on in a particular order. This order is given right here in the instruction, and you'll need to work it in that order just so that everything falls into place as it should. Now, let me just say, it has been a huge pleasure teaching you how to crochet 2 very important pieces of this pattern, the sleeves and the flowers. Now, I encourage you to share your photos with me on social. You can find me on Instagram at BeHooked. And if you use the hashtag BeHooked, that's BHOOKED, then I'll be able to see your progress. I'll see you there, and I'll see you in the next tutorial. Bye for now.